This year will be my 19th year in the travel nurse staffing industry, and I've been thinking often about how the landscape looked in the very beginning, what contracts looked like. Where was the VMS or the MSP? Quite honestly, the MSP didn't even exist back then necessarily, but the VMS certainly did, and association still existed at that point. So on this episode, I want to break down exactly what's an MSP, what is a VMS, what are direct contracts, and then we're going to get deeper into direct contracts with our Director of New Business Development, Mike Combs. Atlas All Access starts now. All right, first off, Mikey, welcome.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here with us.
Absolutely.
I thought first things first, because you were a client manager in the beginning too, and theoretically, I mean, you still are. You're working directly with clients every day.
Yeah, just a little different landscape, but
Exactly. Let's break down what's a VMS, what's an MSP, and what's a direct contract, because there are a number of new travelers out there, or maybe just in general, people on the sidelines that don't know exactly what the difference is between the three of them. We live in that world every day.
Yeah.
So let's break that down. MSP first.
Yep.
Managed service provider.
Typically your sole point of contact, that is the one company or agency that works with a facility or set of facilities. They would handle all of their needs, so they would send everything that they have open they need to fill to that MSP. That MSP then has a group of agencies that work under them that they subcontract that out to. Some of them have their own staffing arm as well. Some of them do not. And they would disseminate all those needs out to get those filled for the facility. So the facility just has one person to basically work with.
So I think your keywords there are the MSP, the managed service provider, is an agency, like us.
Can be.
Right? Not us. We don't do that. That isn't one of the things that we offer. But in general, the MSP is run by an agency.
An agency or the company that just solely wants to procure those needs and help that facility or system out.
Vendor managed service, VMS, which is one of the older terms in our industry. What is that then?
Yep, so a vendor managed service is typically somebody's technology that they use or platform that they use, and doesn't even have to be a platform in the old days. It could be simply as an email where a hospital would email out a whole list of needs, which probably is more when you client managed.
That's a long time ago. We would get faxes of needs, quite honestly, back in the day.
And then that technology or that way to disseminate those needs would be just sent out across the board.
Yep. So a vendor manager is generally vendor neutral. I mean, is third party. It's definitely a third party. It's not run by an agency. What's the split? Is it vendor neutral? Do you know? Does the hospital know where they're getting profiles from?
It depends on the vendor. Some of them will send in profiles as vendor neutral, so they strip all logos, all company names and everything off of there, so that way it comes in as a truly neutral profile. And some will just leave them and send them in as they are, so it just varies and depends. And then typically in the unit, as travelers and managers talk, they kind of find out what agencies they do work for. But overall, it is meant to be a neutral site.
Right. Well, that's where like marketing comes into play, where every new nurse that starts with us gets a jacket that has our name on it, right?
Absolutely.
So they know, even in the vendor neutral type of scenarios, they're still wearing Atlas gear, right? And they're wearing that jacket on the unit. So, and that's actually been a way that other Atlas nurses can identify each other while they're on a contract, quite honestly.
Absolutely.
So, all right. And then finally, your world, direct accounts. Tell me what a direct account is.
So direct accounts kind of break out into two buckets. You have truly direct, and that is where I and anybody on the team is working directly with the facility. And we're
Directly
working
with someone at the
directly
hospital.
with somebody at the hospital.
Okay.
Could be somebody in their human resources, could be somebody on the unit, just depending on how their comfort level is to set it up. It's typically a one point of contact, and we work directly with them to help fill out their needs, so that way unit managers are not being bothered and being pulled back from the floor or anything else. Those unit managers then typically will set some time aside to go and call, do the interviews. But even that can be split up anymore. Sometimes there's clinical liaisons that come into play that will handle the interviews on behalf of the facility. The other side of that bucket is it can be a true direct contract where we still work with the facility, but then they employ a technology to use as a kind of a medium ground for filling needs through, for doing all the back end for any of your billables and so on.
Uploading profiles, uploading time cards, that
Yep.
type of thing. Reverse billing for payments,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I mean, and I don't want to ask a dumb question because I got some questions here, but in that's the world I came from was direct contracts, and that's the world you work in right now. This is my dumb question. What do you believe is the easiest? Not necessarily for us, but for the traveling healthcare professional. What do you think is the easiest path of least resistance for them? The VMS, the MSP, or the direct contract?
I think it's wherever you have the quickest path to the decision maker and to not have to have anybody in the middle and, kind of weeding those out.
That was a great non-answer. Thank you. All right, I've got a couple of questions for you, just in general, and I want to dig back into your experience here, just a little bit. How do you believe the landscape has changed when it comes to hospital contracts post pandemic? Like we all worked. You and I both worked in it before, pre-pandemic days, right?
Yep.
Your wife was a recruiter for a while, living in that exact same world. How do you believe that has changed post-pandemic now?
I almost think it's still too early to tell. If I were to look at indicators, I think there's a lot of frustration in all areas, and that frustration is currently being sorted out.
Interesting. Okay. I don't think I can disagree. I think there are still drawbacks to direct accounts. Obviously, direct accounts for us are very good. We don't have to pay a fee to anybody, right? And we have that direct access. At the same time, some of our very best are MSPs.
Yeah.
By far, we get paid faster. We get interviewed faster. Our relationships are better with that one point of contact. I think it's like I said, the landscape has changed. VMS was a bad word back in the day.
Yeah.
It was not a popular choice from an agency standpoint.
And I think a lot of that changed with just the changes in the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic. You just saw a lot of different efficiencies being exposed that previously were not.
Efficiencies is the key word there, especially when it comes to technology. I think the VMS and the MSP were on the forefront of kind of offering that plus one, that additional piece. If they're going to charge us a percentage, in some cases 5%, 6%, 7%, 8%, they've got to offer something to us for that, and offer something back to the hospital. And it's that technology piece, that speed to market piece that they offered.
Yeah, I can remember when I started as a client manager and started working with some of the technologies. There were some bad technologies out there back then.
Yeah, there was.
None that need to be named, but they were just bad.
Yeah.
And since the technology piece has really come up, and there are some great technology companies out there right now, some that we're working with on a daily basis that have really brought some just frontier changing tech into this space.
Right.
And not only they make our jobs easier, they make the facility's job a lot easier. Well, the easier you can make everybody's job, it just translates to our traveler, who now has a much better experience going through that process.
Right. And I think it's important to take a second here and say and clarify, technology doesn't mean recruiterless, right?
Correct.
There is a subset of companies out there who are very, very good at raising money that claim to be a recruiterless model that aren't very good at actually creating revenue, quite honestly. So, and that's just honestly, that's my opinion. We could talk about that, for hours and hours. But that's not what technology means. Technology means how quickly you can see jobs, how quickly you can see pay rates, how you upload your profile, how you upload your documentation, your compliance package to that vendor or to that MSP.
Yeah, just creating an overall solution.
Correct.
And that solution is something that impacts everybody that touches the technology.
Okay, back into your world. How do you think what the benefits to a direct account outside of just the fees, right? What's the benefit of an agency like Atlas having a direct account with a hospital?
Really being able to communicate back and forth much quicker, not having to wait for another person or another group of people to bring that information back. So a lot quicker turnaround times, a lot quicker responses typically. As long as the relationship's established, that's another key component to it. I can work direct with anybody, but if I don't know who I'm working with and they don't know who they're working with,
Right.
then we're kind of back to square one.
Yep. Last question. Get your crystal ball out here. I want you to go, okay, 2023, what happens to contracts this year? Because we've heard there's been rumblings, right? We're kind of back to a regular cycle again when it comes to travel nursing. We're kind of back to a regular cycle when it comes to hospitals going to one vendor and leaving and going to another vendor and leaving, that type of thing, that kind of shuffle happening. And we're seeing it quite honestly every day.
Yeah.
What happens in 2023? Where do you think that this goes? More vendors, less vendors, more direct, less direct? What do you think?
I think you see a lot less agency-wise, I think you see a lot less agency in the market. I think you see a lot of contracting, a lot of tightening up, and just a lot of overall constriction.
Do you see more agency so do you see more vendors using fewer agencies then? Is that kind of where...
I think you see the vendors that are out there existing using less agencies.
I think so too.
And I'm already seeing it.
We see it every day, quite honestly. So that brings me to just my opinion. Now this is just my opinion. This is the world that we live in right now. Whether we like it or not, this is the world that we live in when it comes to hospital contracts, when we are taking your profile and we're sending it to a hospital for a contract for an open need. We have any different ways to get that contract, get your profile to that contact there at the facility to actually get that interview and eventually get the offer. I believe it's important. After 19 years, I think I kind of understand how this all kind of fits together. It's important for you as a traveling healthcare professional to ask the right questions. Ask them. You can ask us. I mean, that's our recruiters talk to our client managers every day.
Absolutely.
And our relationship managers at the top that work with our very best vendors and MSPs. But if you're working for another agency, ask, is this a direct contract? If it's not, is it a vendor? Is it working through another agency? Ask those questions up front. The follow-up question to that then is, if it's not a direct, where does your agency fall within the vendor's tiering system? Because every vendor has that. They have a top 10 or a top 20 of agencies that they work with who qualify on any number of different levels. Yeah. Compliance, number of profiles, the quality of profiles. Like there's a scorecard for us when it comes to each of those different vendors out there. Ask the agency that you're working for where they fall in that vendor's tiering system, because that's important too. If that agency isn't tier 1 with that vendor, your odds of getting your profile even getting a look are almost zero, because of the number of profiles that each of these jobs are getting when they open. They're going to look at those tier 1 first. And even before that, and you can talk to this, even before that MSP is going to look in-house first. They're going to recruit, in most cases, before they give it to their tier 1.
Absolutely, they are. And the other thing to kind of clarify, too, on that is tiering is a thing regardless. Some MSPs actually have a set-out tiering that they have, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, et cetera, after they've either filled the needs internally, or maybe the tier 1 actually gets needs the same time or 24 hours after their internal. Get the needs out there. But then the ones that do not have an established tiering program still tier, even if it's a mental tiering, because they're going to tier based off of who is better fit to work with them.
Yep. And so your odds of, again, if the company you're working for started 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that type of thing, and they don't have that establishment with that vendor, and most, quite honestly, haven't had the time to establish themselves like that, your odds of getting that profile in front of the person that's going to do that interview are almost none. I mean, that's how competitive this market has become. I think it's just important to ask those questions. Ask them up front. Now, you might be surprised. You might be like, yeah, we're absolutely a tier 1 with that vendor, and I can get you that interview. I just placed 3 people there last week. Perfect. You're with the right people. Stay there. You're doing the right things. You're asking the right questions. You don't need to go look for another agency. You don't need to go look for another recruiter at that point. You've got it. Put your faith in that recruiter that you've been working with and ask them those questions, and hopefully they're honest with you. So
100%.
just my opinion. So, all right, Mike, thank you so much.
Appreciate you having me.
I appreciate you being in here with us. So, as always, if you have questions, you can always ask me. Dolan and Nathan will put my information right down here. Send me an email. Ask me a question. You can find me on Facebook all the time, more than I probably should be on Facebook, or on LinkedIn. I'm there as well. So, feel free to ask questions. I've been an open book. I always will be an open book. So
Yeah, if I need to get hold of Rich, I usually just Facebook message him.
there we go. He usually does. That is absolutely true. All right. We'll see you next week.